What is happening out there, Roto Scouts football fans? Welcome to a Monday night show, gang. A little two-gamer lined up for this week. Not bad. Anthony Taylor's popping into the chat right when we go live. Happy NFL Monday to you too, pal. Good to see you. Chat just filling in. I know there's other shows going on. I tried to thread the needle between some other people's shows. Probably didn't get it exactly right starting up at 6:30, but hey, we will take what we get as far as everybody who wants to come hang out here. I appreciate every single one of the people who does arrive. Hit the like button on your way in the door as we get started. A couple of interesting games tonight. Probably a lot better of a game between Tampa Bay and Baltimore. The 50-point total reflects that. Baltimore, 4-point favorites on the road in Tampa Bay. But a lot of upside for that Tampa Bay passing attack. We'll see what we get out of their rushing game this week. But Baltimore's given up a lot through the air, so I kind of like the upside for Baker and some of his pals there. The Baltimore side, kind of just straight line. You know, they're basically always the same read every single week. Give up some points, but outscore your opponent most weeks. Pretty good recipe for winning football games. The second game's a little bit clunkier. I don't love the Chargers and Cardinals game, but definitely DFS-wise, plenty of pieces to work with. I just updated the projections a few minutes ago. Got DJ Shark out of there. I actually realized, despite what the headline said, that the projections were locked behind the paywall because I forgot to uncheck the thing. It does say free today, and as of now, they are actually free today. So projections for these two games up on the website, free today. NBA projections going up probably overnight, but first thing in the morning at the absolute latest. They're done. They're sitting in the background. I could give you guys a quick sneak preview if you want to. Here, this is for everybody who's not subscribed. I'm thinking about it. There they were. Those were the NBA projections for tomorrow. They're done. They're waiting. Haven't put them up on the site yet, but like I was saying, going to be up on the site tonight. We will be live tomorrow for an NBA show to break down the two-game NBA slate. It's going to be madness tomorrow. If you haven't paid attention across sports today, the NHL has just one game. I didn't even end up projecting it. It's just a showdown slate. It's kind of like baseball. Just play the guys who are playing. But tomorrow, on NBA opening night, the NHL decided to save up all their games. They're running 16 games tomorrow. So that should be fun. I'm hoping that it's just a 13-game NHL slate because 3 of them are in the 6 p.m. window, but it's going to be bananas for me tomorrow, just keeping everything up to speed. So thankfully, it's only the 2-gamer for NBA, and then we get a more complete NBA slate on, Wednesday. So that'll be a lot of fun, but the point is, everything's live on Roto Scouts. You'll have full NHL projections, full NBA projections every week of NFL season, all in pricing for all of those sports, every data point, every projection, every piece of content, under $1 a day for access to all of it, all the sports, not sport by sport, every sport, every projection, under $1 a day. So check it out at rotoscouts.com if you're new. I'm sure most of you guys already have, and I appreciate all of you. Check out acemind.io. We'll be checking out some of their sim results. Got them running in the background right now. And it looks like, let's see, good, we're completed. I had to rerun them. I had them all set up, all nice, and I liked what I was seeing, and then I saw the DJ Shark news, and I had to take them out and rerun these things in the last 15 minutes, but it looks like we're done. We'll take a peek at those toward the end of the show. But let's kind of dive in. No need to pull that board up. We've got all the info over here. That was just the Vegas games. Fully updated. 50-point total, like I was saying, between Baltimore and Tampa Bay. I do favor that game between the two, but the other one does have a 44.5-point total, and it's technically a closer point spread. Just a point separating those two teams in Arizona. Arizona 1-point dogs at home. It's just kind of lower-end options. The Chargers really haven't been great on offense. Herbert's cracked 200 yards once all season. That was just this most recent game. They didn't get Shark back. They are dealing with all these guys in yellow. Everybody basically in their receiving group, except for Joshua Palmer, is coming into the game with a Q tag. It looks like all 3 of those guys are going to play. But DJ didn't make it out there. If they had activated DJ, I'd be worried about one of those guys. I'd be, kind of monitoring status a little bit more closely. But I think they all go. They're just kind of mediocre. And then on the Arizona side, we get the nice upside piece with Marv Harrison Jr. He's got a decent connection with Kyler. We get a good running back in James Conner. They're going to be charging kind of headlong into a decent defense, though, and one that's been a pretty decent scoring defense for DFS purposes. They haven't been allowing a ton of yardage. So I just don't love this game, but obviously we're getting pieces on both sides. 2-game slate, you're taking whatever comes. You're trying to play a little bit of ownership and leverage threading. Definitely construction-wise, we're open to allowing, I'd say, up to 2 players against your defense. That's how I had it set for the Ace Mine Sim. I just let that fly. I think it's for only 2 games. It's a lot easier to just kind of let the sim build the full pool of lineups and take what we get out of that rather than what I was saying about the more full slates where I really like to do a fully constructed pool of actually built, man-built lineups. I almost said man-handled lineups. I like to beat the lineup up a little bit before I put it in the sim pool. Ducking's here. What's going on, Ducking? Good to see you. Chime in if you're in chat. Looks like a group of people just jumped in. Little quorum going. I appreciate you guys. Hit the like button on your way in the door. You already missed the plug, so nice timing. Way to avoid the advertising. But I appreciate you guys popping in. So let's get started on that first game. And carve the second one out of here. You want to go game by game or should we go position by position just because that second game kind of sucks? For a 2-game, you know what? I think for a 2-gamer, let's look at positions. What the hell? Herbert on the low end of the quarterback spectrum here. He's facing a defense that's allowed 4.7 yards per pass attempt, or per rush attempt, 8.1 yards per pass attempt. Plenty of upside there. And you can see it's the same. So ignore the rankings on these. It's a multi-way tie at 8.1 yards per attempt. And both Baltimore and Arizona's defenses are allowing that much yardage. So bottom of the barrel as far as pass defense in a yardage sense. Baltimore's allowed a lot of scoring through the air. So again, I do like the idea of getting to some of that Tampa passing attack. And then Arizona is allowing scoring basically in every facet of the game. 3.2 touchdowns allowed per game so far. 27.2 points overall allowed. 29th in football. The 3.2 is also 29th. 1.3 rushing touchdowns. So a lot of passing touchdowns, a lot of rushing touchdowns. They're just a gettable defense. So I think it does float the upside for the Chargers a little bit. On the Arizona side, the Chargers really just allowing 4.2 yards per rush attempt. Might bite into James Conner's upside or his true ceiling anyway, but he's a very solid veteran running back. And then they're allowing 6.8 yards per pass attempt, kind of in the middle of the league, ranked 13th. They've gained just 14% pressure, and there's really not that much pressure coming either way in that second game. So with the idea that 2 veteran quarterbacks might have a little bit, or quarterbacks with a few years under their belts anyway, not grizzled old veterans really, but guys who know what they're doing out there, not really facing much pressure. Both teams with 14% pressure rates, 13 sacks for the Chargers D, 11 sacks for Arizona's D. Both teams have picked off 5 passes. So those are just kind of all middle of the board type ratings. It's not exactly outstanding. Where the Chargers have been good is in limiting actual scoring. They're just allowing 1.4 touchdowns a game overall, 13.2 opposing points per game. Unfortunately for Chargers fans, they're only scoring 18.2. So it's just kind of every time out, just who are they facing? How much can we expect? And do they have any chance of hanging with that team? They have not been good at the last part there so far this season. As far as the passing attacks go, I think it does become somewhat straightforward in that Baker's going up against what is a fairly weak pass attack, but they do have a little bit of a pass rush, 21.7% pressure rate. It's the same pressure rate on the other side that Tampa Bay's gaining against their opponents. Baltimore's picked up a couple more sacks, but it's not a huge difference, 19 versus 17 in that game. Only 3 picks for Baltimore secondary, 5 for Tampa Bay's. They've been a little bit better in the defensive backfield. Both teams, again, wield somewhat capable defenses, but this looks like it has all the makings of a pretty high-scoring game and a game that could definitely turn into a bit of a shootout, especially if Tampa Bay gets up a little bit early and Baltimore's chasing through the first half and needing to score. That could become an interesting game script. So I kind of like that spot. As far as the actual volume that these guys are putting up, greatly favors these 2 quarterbacks. There's no secret about that. So again, despite the fact that I was just, kind of talking them up a little bit for the matchup, it is just completely straightforward. Both of these guys averaging around 250 yards. Baker's completed 71% of his pass attempts on 31.5 attempts per game. He's got the highest passing volume. Even with that being slightly higher than the other three quarterbacks, it's not exactly a super high-end volume-wise. We're typically, I want to see 33, 35. It's not far off the mark. And again, it's the best one we've got to work with today. But it's not extreme pass volume. It's just they're one of these hyper-efficient offenses, and especially in the passing game. He's thrown 15 passing touchdowns already against just 5 interceptions, throwing for basically 250 yards a game. 7.9 yards per pass attempt. On the other side, Lamar's throwing for 8.7 yards per pass attempt. So he and Baker, both big gains in the passing game. He's thrown the ball 29 times a game, completed 67% of his passes, over 250 yards a game. 4.6 air yards per attempt versus the 3.6 that Baker's put up. A little bit more of an arm on Lamar, but Baker can make all the throws he needs to, and he's got a couple big downfield weapons. Lamar's weapons, to me, are a little bit more hit and miss. Zay Flowers, pretty good. Outside of that, a little bit more hit and miss. The split duties at the tight end position is never ideal. So we'll give it a look, but Lamar Jackson, when we get to the running back, we'll talk Derrick Henry in a minute. And then Lamar plus one of his receivers is a pretty strong weapon in just a 2-game slate. So a lot to work with on the Baltimore side and a lot surrounding the passing game. I would have no issues if you can figure out a configuration where it works to go Lamar with none of his pass catchers, like Lamar, Derrick Henry, and the Baltimore defense. I don't love the Baltimore defense there, actually, against Tampa Bay. Lamar, Derrick Henry, and then build from Tampa Bay and the other guys as just a construction that, might be a little bit underplayed, where you're still getting to the two major pieces from the Baltimore side, but you're not including that correlated pass catcher, because I think we've all been parts of games where Lamar has not actually thrown, major touchdown upside to his receivers. They just accrue some yardage, and then he takes the touchdowns. Derrick Henry takes the touchdowns. So not the craziest way to go about a lineup build on either side. Lamar's thrown 10 touchdowns against just 2 interceptions. It's been absolutely tremendous. He's also run 2 in, but so is Baker. It's worth noting that on significantly different attempts per game, Lamar's been running the ball 7 times more per game and outgaining Baker 3-1. But Baker's put up 6.5 yards per rush attempt to the 6.3 that Lamar has, and he's got the same 2 rushing touchdowns. They're obviously 2 very, very different runners with the football, and they're running under different circumstances. But it is interesting that the output's been kind of similar on a per attempt basis. In the other game, both of these guys are under 200 yards per game. Justin Herbert is way under 200 yards per game. He's only thrown the ball 25 times per game. That's the lowest passing volume in this game, on this slate. They've got a high volume running back on that team, so it's spotty at best as far as the pass attempts. It's spotty at best as far as what the upside has been at all. Only thrown 6 touchdown passes against 1 interception. The 1 interception's great, but just 6 touchdowns, 163 yards a game, 6.5 per pass attempt, just a 3.4 air yards per attempt. It's on a 7.5 intended air yards per attempt, so he's trying to get the ball downfield, but they really haven't been connecting on many of those downfield looks. Between the two, Kyler is by far the more inclined to rush. He's running the ball about 5 times a game, about half the volume that Lamar puts up, but he gains a significant 8.7 yards per attempt, 6.5 yards before contact, 43.5 per game on his design runs, his scrambles. 1 touchdown already on the season, and definitely a threat in that department. As far as the passing, just under 200 yards on 68% completions, 28 passes a game, puts him 3rd in this one, but still an effective enough kind of efficient passer. He's only thrown 8 touchdowns. That's where we get into a little bit of the flaws, but that could change pretty quickly if he enhances that connection with his big-time young receiver. If he gets Trey McBride involved a little bit more, we could see that upside increase in a hurry, and it's a nice ratio so far, the 8-2. So Kyler's always in play. I expect that the ownership's going to kind of straight line through those 4 in that order. Lamar pretty offset at the top, followed by Baker. Little offset between Baker and Kyler, but they'll be closer together, I think, than the gap between like Baker and Justin Herbert. They'll probably also be closer together, the two, Baker and Murray, than Herbert would be close to either one of those guys, is the way I should have said that. So if you're looking for just true differentiation for differentiation's sake, just going to Justin Herbert is an easy path toward that. He's also affordable, 5,500 on DK, 72 on FanDuel. Bigger offset on the DK slate. You get $1,000 savings, which is kind of worthwhile. And, I mean, it's a downgraded receiving group that has greatly impacted his ability on the field, is at least one part of it. So it's not great, but he did show maybe a little bit of life in the last game against Denver, which has been a pretty good defense up to that point. 21 of 34, that's 61.8%. The 34 pass attempts was a season high. Completed threw for 237 yards, just one touchdown, but no interception. He's only had one multi-touchdown game. That was 2 touchdowns, but only threw for 130 yards on 14 of 20 passing back in week 2 against Carolina. The volume just really has not been there. As far as that Chargers defense goes, I was referring just before to the limitations that they've been able to come up with as far as opponent scoring. But it is worth noting in that sense that they've played Vegas, Carolina, Pittsburgh, and Denver in their 5 games. The one good team that they've played good offense is Kansas City, and even they've been fairly underwhelming scoring wise. So it is kind of a deceptive scoring total. I don't think that that's necessarily anything predictive going forward, but it is a decent defense in terms of stopping the yardage per attempt, which is something that I care greatly about. That's why we're always talking about that. But again, not an aggressive defense, not an aggressive scoring defense as far as our purposes for playing the defense goes. So just looking at their game logs, I wanted to call that out because it does jump out that those are very, very weak opponents. And that also obviously does have an impact on the yards per attempt number. Once they get up against better opponents, those will go up. But it is at least somewhat indicative. What else can we say about these quarterbacks? Probably nothing until we get to the sim results. I think we covered basically all of this. The running back position, most of these teams were going to go... Well, actually, 2 of these teams, it's more of a primary with a somewhat capable secondary. Tampa gives us kind of a split here with Rachaad White still banged up. Sean Tucker poached a decent amount of the upside away from Bucky Irving, but they both had good games in the last contest. But all 3 of those guys are going to be smashing into a rush defense that's only allowing 3 yards per rush attempt this season. That ranks first by a mile. So that's a little problematic for the rushing game. They do throw the ball to all 3 of those running backs. So I think that puts them on the board a little bit more if they can get out and catch a couple passes. That gives them a little upside. And I do think from an ownership perspective, this group is probably going to be pretty thin. Yeah, just looking at ownership projections on FanDuel as an example, Rachaad White in these ownership projections projected to be the most highly owned running back from that Tampa group, and he's 4th overall on the board, and he's offset by nearly 30 percentage points from number 3. So regardless of which Tampa running back you choose, you could see some pretty major upside. The guy who's by far the chalkiest, the 2 guys are the 2 obvious guys, the 2 tremendous gainers at the top of the board. We've got Derrick Henry, but he gets a decent little offset with Justice Hill there. Hill is an involved running back. He sees a few reliable touches per game. He played just 38% of the snaps last week, 46% of the snaps the week before. But again, he is an involved running back with some explosive upside, with some pretty good hands, and they do target him. So he's interesting for a short slate format. But again, Derrick Henry, the absolute wrecking ball, future Hall of Famer running back, amazingly still doing it with all the tread on his tires. Guy's carrying the ball nearly 20 times a game. He's gained 5.9 yards per rush attempt this season, 117 yards a game. He's put the ball in the end zone 8 times on the ground already. He's only picked up 1.3 targets, but he does have a touchdown reception on the season, so every now and then they'll turn his way in the passing game up close. Throwing the ball, it's essentially a carry. He catches it 2 yards out and busts his way in just like on a running play. But the 3.5 receptions a game that Justice Hill picks up, in addition to his 3.3 carries a game, again, on a short format, give me my 7 to 10 potential touches, and I've got a little bit of upside at these prices and what will be a significantly offset ownership share. He's not going to be unowned, but he's a big piece of differentiation with some tangible actual ceiling on him, especially if he manages to break one and score. Obviously, you've hit some pay dirt there. So, Derrick Henry, clear, good chalk at the top of the board. The Tampa Bay defense has given up 4.7 yards per rush attempt. That ranks 24th. They have been gouged by opposing running backs. So plenty of upside for yardage, assuming 18 to 20 carries, his usual complement of a ridiculous volume of touches. Henry's got major ability to get up over 100 yards, get to that bonus. Why can I not find this? There it is. The Tampa rush defense is giving up 1.3 rushing touchdowns per game in addition to all those yards that they're giving up. So that ranks 28th. I believe that's also a multi-way tie. But that is a fairly significant number of rushing touchdowns. So major upside in Derrick Henry's direction. But again, I do like Justice Hill there. Patrick Ricard really underprojected, or not underprojected, just low projected under a point. He has only been involved with 0.2 targets per game as a fullback. So really limited action there, just on the board because he's going to be active. He's going to see some snaps. Does play nearly half the snaps, but he's out there mostly to block. Every now and then he picks up one target in a game. As far as those Tampa backs go, I didn't really talk about the volume in that last game. So Rachaad White, questionable, but did practice. Practiced over the weekend, practiced at the end of the week, so it does seem like he's going to be active. He was already losing some share to Bucky Irving, and Bucky is the more productive of the two running backs this season. Rachaad White, this season and last season, mostly gets by on volume, and he pads a lot of stats with some targeting in the passing game, particularly on a PPR site, because he just picks up 3 points on pass receptions. But he does have appreciable upside. He is, if he's going to be active, he is correctly, I think, the more highly projected of the two. But Bucky's right there. And I think it does go back to just them, kind of 1-1-2. It's a true 1-2, an A-B. It's not a 1-1-A necessarily. In White's absence last week, I was expecting it to be Bucky week, kind of full go, but they did mention Tucker was going to be there and Tucker was going to see some opportunities. Bucky outsnapped him basically 2-1, 46 snaps with the offense versus Tucker's 27, but they carried the ball the same number of times, 14 times apiece. Bucky gained 81 yards, scored a touchdown on the ground. He also caught 2 of 2 passes for 24 yards. But Sean Tucker had a day. He carried the ball 14 times for 136, scored a touchdown on the ground, caught 3 of 3 for 56 yards and a touchdown in the passing game. So does that earn Sean Tucker a couple extra looks that might have otherwise gone toward Bucky Irving? Sure. Does that earn Sean Tucker a couple other looks that might have otherwise gone toward Rachaad White? Absolutely. Is this now a Hydra 3-headed backfield? Yeah, kind of. So it's a little bit problematic there. But again, with Rachaad White gaining the highest ownership among all of these guys in the projections I looked at, but offset from the number 3 by a full 30 percentage points, you can play any of those guys, and you're taking shots, and you can get leverage against within this backfield and against the field by going to those guys. James Conner was that number 3 on the ownership. I think, again, I'm not giving away anything there. It's no secret that he would be the third man up behind J.K. Dobbins and Derrick Henry. Conner's been good this season, 4.5 yards per rush attempt. He's carried the ball 15 times a game. He scored 3 rushing touchdowns on the season. 2.1 yards before, 2.4 yards after, showing still a little bit of bounce, a little bit of explosiveness. He's targeted 2.5 times per game in the passing attack. That's not nothing. So a fair amount of involvement, falls a little bit short of the 20 potential touches that we would want on average, but could definitely see a little bit of upside, especially with Trey Benson banged up. Benson was concussed. He was dealing with a concussion recovery. Missed the week 5 and week 6 game, but practiced in full end of last week and over the weekend. So I kind of expect him, but I flagged him in yellow just so I would remember to mention it. If he doesn't go, it would enhance the spot a little bit for Amari DeMarcado, but not all that significantly. DeMarcado sees a couple of targets in the passing game from time to time. Overall, he's carried the ball just 2 times per game. Significant gains on those limited carries, and he's targeted 1.8 times a game, but that did go up to 7 targets last time out in in Benson's absence. So a little bit of ongoing potential upside if that is the situation. It would basically be a case of just kind of if Benson doesn't go, DeMarcado just gets those 2 points essentially. Haskins would get a little bit down the... no, he wouldn't. He's on the other team. What the hell am I talking about? I forgot I didn't have it sorted teams. On the Chargers side, where Hassan Haskins actually plays, you got Kamani Vidal as a interesting kind of second guy here. Played 24% of the snaps last week. Again, not completely interesting if this was a more complete slate, but on a short slate, touches get interesting. Vidal carried the ball. This was his first game active for the season. He played 18 snaps, carried the ball 4 times, gained 11 yards, caught 2 of 2 passes for 40 yards and the touchdown. Not uninteresting, especially with everybody and their brother going to the other guy. 6,400, 6,700, J.K. Dobbins just makes a ton of sense. He's, again, him and Henry, clearly good chalk. Clearly massive upside for, if not a bonus, at least approaching 100 yards, approaching 20 plus touches, approaching touchdown upside, clear touchdown upside for both of those guys. But the Kamani Vidals, the Justice Hills, to a degree, the Bucky Irvings and the Sean Tuckers of the world, those are the guys that could be slate bending at a lot lower ownership from the running back position. So I think it's worth considering those guys at the absolute worst in like a flex spot. If you go chalk in your 2 running back spots, maybe work some of those guys into some flex role. That is obviously, not a crazy approach. It's somewhat obvious, but I think it's worth doing a little bit, probably more than the public might naturally do it. You do have a little bit of appreciable volume in the passing game for J.K. Dobbins, 2.6 targets per game. He's been very, very good with 16.2 carries a game. 5.4 yards per rush attempt is significant. He's gotten into the end zone 3 times on the ground, has not been there in the passing attack. But again, there's upside there. That is a major, major running back who sees significant volume. We are over 18 potential touches a game. That's the second highest option on the slate. Side of that group, we talked about all these guys, talked about all those guys, got all those guys. Jump over to, I'm going to combine the pass catchers. I think that makes sense, right? Any objections? If you're loudly objecting and yelling at your computer screen or your TV or whatever you're watching this on, I can't hear you anyway. You got to put it in the chat. The chat is a little quiet. Powers confirming that Rashad is active. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. Hadn't seen the confirmation before the show started up. Carlos Soto. Hi, buddy. What's going on? Andy's here. Good evening. Greg B. and Cone. Good to see you. I feel like a couple people are missing from our regular crew. I don't know if people are out on vacation or just not football fans. There's a couple of names I haven't seen in the last couple of shows. Hopefully people are doing all right out there. I know a lot of people live in the parts of the country that were hit pretty hard by those storms, so maybe some people dealing with some fallout from that. Maybe some people just hiding in bunkers until after Election Day or after January. I could definitely see that. I can see the appeal in that as well. Yeah, Power, pretty rough for the Niners. I actually didn't even know about the Debo pneumonia. Shit. But yeah, the Ayuk thing is obviously a meltdown. That's a total disaster. And a shame. It's just a player I like. I feel like I talk him up all the time. Every time he's on a slate that we're talking about. I just like the receiver. He's won me money. Anytime you win me money, you get a little bit of esteem from me anyway. So let's talk about some of this receiving core. Again, on Lamar's side, I mean, it's not a terrible group. It's not, I wouldn't even say it's a bad group necessarily. I think Zay is a talented receiver. He's pulling in 5.5 catches a game on 8 targets, a 7.2 yard ADOT, so he's operating in, kind of a medium type role, but garnering 26.8% of the air yards to lead the team slightly. He's only scored 1 touchdown on the season. Bateman's actually got 2. He's the deeper threat between the 2 starting receivers. 13.5 yard ADOT for him. He's also pulling 26% of the air yards. It's a matter of a decimal point or 2 there as far as the difference. But he sees roughly half the targets, half the opportunities that Zay does. He just sees bigger play opportunities. The hands are questionable. The accuracy of the target is shaky at best. Catching 2.8 of 4.3 per game. A little bit of upside there. You do also get with Zay a little bit of here and there rushing opportunity. He's a good gainer when they do run the gadget plays, the jet sweeps and so on, 5.6 yards per attempt. He's only rushed the ball 0.8 times per game, though. We're not exactly talking about a go-to play for this team. It's just a smattering of additional upside for kind of a chalky, obvious player. You've had 3 touchdowns go in Isaiah Likely's direction at the tight end position. That has been a pretty significant timeshare between, or role share anyway, between him and Mark Andrews. Andrews playing 55% of the snaps on average, Isaiah Likely playing 62%, and then cheapo Charlie Kolar, who's probably more, if you're playing a showdown for this one, as a total wild dart throw who's really not significantly involved in the passing attack. He'd be at best on that list, and I question his utility even in that kind of a role. I just hate this timeshare that these guys have been in, because Mark Andrews, I mean, you know, we're a little long in the tooth maybe for the lifespan of an NFL player, but that is a primo tight end still, at least, you know, in the corners of my mind and in the history that some of the projections are based on. So it's tough, but he's only drawn 3 targets a game. 4.2 targets a game have gone in Likely's direction. They both got 4 the last time out. The touchdowns, though, that's a significant touchdown split. Same air yards. Andrews operates a little bit further down the field. You're gaining like an additional 3 air yards per attempt with Andrews, but it masks out basically to the same overall share on the total number of attempts. He did get his touchdown, Mark Andrews, in their most recent game. He caught 3 passes for 66 yards on 4 targets. He had a decent game the game before that as well. He caught 4 of 5 for 55 yards, failed to score. Isaiah Likely in those games, again, outsnapped Mark Andrews. He was targeted similarly, 3 targets in week 5, 4 targets in week 6. He caught 3 of 3 for 13 yards in week 5 against Cincinnati. So again, the more limited as far as like what the actual nature of the route, what the actual nature of the target, the opportunity looks like to accrue yards. But he scored 2 touchdowns in that game. Those were his second and third touchdowns of the season. He had the monster week 1 performance, caught 9 of 12 targets in week 1 for 111 yards and his first touchdown. Since that game, he hasn't been targeted more than the 4 times he was targeted in this past game, the week 6 game. And he hasn't put up more than 27 yards. So yardage-wise, opportunity-wise, we slightly favor Mark Andrews. But in reality, it is kind of just a directly split down the middle, baby. If either one of these guys was getting 9 targets a game, or 8 targets a game, we'd be more inclined. There is major touchdown upside, though, for both of those guys. On a short slate, on a showdown slate, they are targets. They got, in week 5, the week that Likely scored his 2 touchdowns, Likely was targeted in the red zone twice, and Andrews was targeted in the red zone once. Last time out in week 6, when Andrews scored his touchdown, he was targeted in the red zone twice. Likely was targeted in the red zone just once. Those are actually the only 3 red zone targets that both tight ends have gotten this year, which is a little bit surprising. But again, I do slightly, even though the snaps are leaning the other way, even though the volume is slightly leaning the other way, on the nature of the targets, the opportunity to maybe break a 30-yard play, stack up 60, 70 yards on a short slate. If you take a touchdown away, then I think even on shorter volume, it does slightly favor Mark Andrews here. Nelson Aguilar, the third man in as far as the wide receiver position goes. He also operates down the field. He's drawing just 2.5 targets a game, catching basically 1 ball per game on a 12.7-yard ADOT. Hasn't scored yet this season, but does get the occasional downfield look. 1 catch for 25 yards on 3 targets last time out. 1 catch for just 4 yards on 4 targets. That's a disaster game in week 5. 1 catch for 56 in week 3. That's kind of emblematic of the kind of catch that you can get out of that player. Specifically known for not having good hands. And again, the quality of the target varies pretty wildly when on these deep downfield routes. But he does have that upside. He's got slate bending ability on 1 big catch. It's kind of like what I was talking about with Alec Pierce the other day. Devontae Walker hasn't played yet. Is he going to be active? Do we have that news? Let me see. Oh, did I close that site? God damn it. 7:06 on your clocks. This slate starts at 8:15. We'll be up and out of here in plenty of time for that. Just got to get through the pass catchers, and then we'll talk some Ace Mine Sim results. But let me check on these the status here. I see no update on Walker yet, which is annoying. He's a 4th-round pick. You'd think they'd like to get him on the field. Okay, looks like he's active as of about 20 minutes ago. So, let's see. 6'1", 198. Give him a little bit of a size upside. North Carolina product by way of Kent State. Drafted coming off of a 8-game, 41-catch, 699 yards, 7 touchdown season. He also carried the ball 3 times for 23 yards. At Kent State in 22, he caught 58 balls for 11 touchdowns, 921 yards, 15.9 yards per catch. Look, if you're just putting another arrow in the quiver, I don't mind it for a few shots. Again, considering that there is a little bit of draft capital and they are thin at that position, a couple of looks for the kid wouldn't surprise me. And then Wallace, believe is going to be active. I haven't seen anything to say otherwise. He caught 2 balls in week 5, and those are his only 2 catches of the season. That's despite running at least 1 route every week except for last week. Last week he only played 5 snaps with the offense, ran no routes, obviously went untargeted. But the 2 catches were also the game where he drew his only 2 targets of the season, and it's a player who maxed out at 14 snaps, and now they've got a rookie 4th-rounder coming in to potentially just step into that spot. Tylan Wallace was drafted in the 4th round also, but that was back in 2021. So, between the two, I think they probably favor the kid making his debut a little bit, but you're throwing darts either way. These 2 receivers, you're not throwing darts. Those 2 receivers, you kind of know that you're going to get at least a touchdown out of one of those guys. They've got 5 apiece on the season. Been absolutely tremendous. A big part of Baker's success. He's got a major, major connection with both guys. Love what the team does. 5.5-yard ADOT for Chris Godwin. A little bit more underneath, but tons of involvement on 8.8 targets a game. Went up to 13 last week. He's got that upside into double digits basically any given week. But so does Mike Evans. When they need it, it's there. Evans operates a little further down the field, basically double the average depth of target at 10.3 yards yard ADOT. 7 targets a game for him. He dipped to 6 last week, but touchdown scoring upside is always present. 41% of the air yards go in Evans' direction. Major, major threats, major assets. And again, the Baltimore defense has been gouged by opposing passing attacks so far this season. So tremendous upside for those 2 receivers to succeed today. I like the upside for a couple of touchdown passes out of Baker and the direct correlation between those guys. And again, Baker not going to be unpopular, but he's going to be second on the quarterback list to Lamar. So you're getting a little bit of an angle there. Godwin last time out, 11 of 13 for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those were his first touchdowns in 3 weeks. He didn't score in week 4 or week 5, but he did catch 6 balls for 69 and 5 balls for 64. So still significant amount of involvement. 3 straight 1-touchdown catches to start the season. Evans had 2 touchdowns week 1, 1 in week 4, 2 in week 5. Hasn't been over 100 yards yet. We might have an issue getting to that 1,000-yard mark. We're 6 weeks into the season, and he's peaked at 94 yards. But he's never played an NFL season where he hasn't gained 1,000 yards. I like the upside for him to approach 100 today. Maybe it's a little bit more sneaky between the 2 because Godwin's averaging significantly more yardage. But love the upside for both of those receivers. Cade Otton, a somewhat involved tight end. He's got 1 touchdown on the season, just a 4.3-yard ADOT, but he's drawing 5.2 targets per game. They do throw his direction. They've thrown his direction pretty much every game, at least once in the red zone. Exactly 1 red zone target from weeks 2 through 5, and then picked up 2 red zone targets last week and scored his first touchdown of the year. Ironically, that was his lowest yardage output in any game where he's had at least 1 catch. Gained just 15 yards on 2 of 6 receiving. Bad receiving game. Week before that, he caught 3 of 4 for 44, 6 of 9 for 52 in week 4. Had a couple clunkers in weeks 1 and 2 when this team was just finding its footing. but came alive and has basically stayed alive and has been involved once they get in close. So I like the touchdown scoring upside for Otten. Like him a lot on showdown format slates. Don't really have to worry about like the split situation like what you do have to up there. Don't have to worry about like the low end nature of the player like you do down here. Trey McBride and Cade Otton, I think, are the clear 1-2 there. And I would tend to think that McBride picks up more of the ownership. So Otton, a reasonably interesting pivot point, and if he gets a touchdown, that's probably a major inflection point for the slate as a whole. Just a matter of whether he comes down with that touchdown. Sterling Shepard stayed involved. Ended up 3 catches for 23 yards, but also carried the ball 4 times and gained 31 yards on the ground in an interesting performance. Was targeted 4 times, so we're talking about 8 potential touches, a little bit of yardage output. He caught the 1 ball for 4 yards and a touchdown in week 5, had 3 catches for 51 yards in week 4. We do have Trey Palmer on the board here as well. He's been questionable. Looks like he's off the injury report. He was out the last 2 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how he slots in and how he compares with Shepard. Prior to his departure, 3 catches for 26 yards and a touchdown in week 4. That was on just 9 routes run over 11 snaps, though. 12 snaps in week 3. 1 target over 9 routes. The involvement's been pretty thin for Trey Palmer. So even if it is a threat to Sterling Shepard, we're talking about a fairly minor one, and we're talking about guys who are not extremely involved either way. 1 touchdown apiece on the season. And you've got Jalen McMillan kind of lingering there. He's also got a touchdown. That came in week 1 on 1 catch, 32 yards that week. Caught exactly 1 pass in each of the first 3 weeks. Didn't play week 4, didn't play week 5. Played 14 snaps in week 6. Was targeted once on 6 routes run. Didn't catch it. It's basically dart throws here and here. This is probably a little bit more secure. Right, this is like the dart you've thrown after like 4 beers, and these are like 6 beer, 7 beer in darts. Right, a little bit less potential, but playable on a 2-gamer. Playable. Marv Harrison Jr., an interesting young receiver, obviously. 4 touchdowns on the season, 4 touchdowns for the career, 6.2 targets a game. Trey McBride pulling a little bit more volume with his 7.6 targets per game. Marv, a little bit of issue with him, a little bit of issue with Malik Neighbors from my Giants as far as actually staying on the field for a full football game. Came out after just 8 snaps after taking a bump in the last one. Both young receivers tend to take some ouchies and come out for a couple of plays. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I think somebody needs to have the "are you injured or are you hurt" talk with these guys. But there's obviously a lot of talent in both players. Marv had a bad week 1, caught 4 balls for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns in that big week 2 breakout. But if you remember that one, he came out for a few plays. He only ended up playing 43 snaps. Not nothing, but it's less than he would have. Ran 25 routes that week. The following week, he played 46 snaps, ran 35 routes, 5 catches for 64 yards and another touchdown. Piled a 3rd week on after that against Washington with a 3rd week with a touchdown, 3rd week in a row. That game kind of a disappointment, though. Another one, he ran fewer than 30 routes, just 27 routes run across 53 snaps. Caught 5 of 6 targets, but only for 45 yards. It's not a monster performance. He's only been over 100 the one time. Hasn't had more than 5 catches in a game. Peaked at 11 targets. There is tons and tons of talent here. And he's their clear lead receiver. But I mean, 6.2 targets a game is not massive volume. Zay Flowers targeted is fairly significantly more. Chris Godwin, much more. Mike Evans, more. It's not completely dissimilar volume to like what Cade Otton gets. It's essentially what Ladd McConkey gets. He can do more with it, but the number of opportunities to do that are somewhat clipped by comparison to some of the other guys. Now, granted, that does get impacted by short performance. But again, we haven't been more than 11 targets. McBride has seen pretty steady target volume throughout the season. He had his biggest week in week 6. He caught 8 of 8 for 96 yards, but he hasn't been in the end zone yet this season. The output has been pretty disappointing at the tight end position for a number of these high-end tight ends this season. Him, Laporta, Ferg, I want to say, hasn't had a good start to the season. I can't remember the top of my head with Ferg. Don't quote me on that one, but tight end's been a little bit more limited this year for scoring than in recent seasons. And McBride's been part of that, but he's still drawing major targeting, 7.6 targets per game and 8.1 yard ADOT, so effective downfield targets as far as this position goes. It's a little bit shorter than what Andrews gets, similar to what Likely gets, but it's not bad. It's not little, dump out safety valve type passing. As far as red zone opportunities go from McBride, he saw 2 in week 5 and 1 in week 1, and no other red zone targets. So just 3 red zone opportunities this season. They need to pump that up. Greg Dortch drawing 4.5 targets a game, catching 3.2 of them on a 6.1 yard ADOT. It's a little bit difficult to make anything happen with that kind of volume on that kind of targeting, but he does see the opportunities to. So you put the ball in his hands. If we're looking for a dart throw at a potential explosive play, there is a little bit of upside for that. He's an involved receiver. It's just not major scoring upside and really does need to break a major play to make anything happen as far as fantasy scoring. He's not expensive, 41.49 across sites. He's easy to work in for a third man kind of an opportunity, but it's a fairly low overall ceiling. More secure floor than high ceiling. Zay Jones is another player's status I got to check real quick here. Looks like Zay's going to play also. It's a double Zay day, I think. He doesn't have an injury tag on him. Let me see. Yeah, looks like he's officially active. So this will be Zay's first game of the year. Last season, just 9 games with Jacksonville. Caught 34 passes, 321 yards, 2 touchdowns. Was targeted 64 times, so he's caught essentially half of his passes for 5 yards per target. Not all that good. Year before, he was better. Much more involved, for one thing. It was his age 27 season. He was targeted 121 times for 6.8 yards per target. Caught 5 touchdown passes. Only 823 yards, the 6.8 per target. It's 823 yards total on 82 catches. And he had 9 drops. That's a significant drop number. Not the best hands in the world, but potential to see at least a couple of looks at a also relatively cheap price, $4,500 on DraftKings. Between him and Greg Dortch, though, with Dortch checking in a little bit cheaper, it's an interesting decision point on DK. These two. On FanDuel, Zay Jones is $900 cheaper, so maybe you throw that dart over on the FanDuel slate. Elijah Higgins just seeing limited volume as a backup tight end, but he does have 2 touchdowns on the season to McBride's 0, so maybe a little bit of involvement, a little bit of a sneaky dart, probably more aligned to showdown play. But if he sees that opportunity and to catch a touchdown pass at a very low price, especially 27 on DK, that could be a potential inflection point for the slate as well. Just limited down the board here. 1 target has gone toward Xavier Weaver. He got into his first action last week. 38 snaps, ran 27 routes, threw him 1 ball, and he did not catch it. Probably going to lose any opportunity upside with Zay coming back. And then McConkey, leading this team with 6.4 targets a game, basically getting double the volume than what his counterparts here in this receiver core get. Josh Palmer, forgot to change him over here. Come on, Joshua. Would you like to play a game? All right, good enough. I don't care about his air yard share. 8.8 air yards per, 8.8 average depth of target. It's okay. 3.3 targets per game. Again, it's fine. Not my idea of a high-end target. Not my idea of a premium receiver. We had a little preseason buzz, and then he hasn't seen more than 4 targets in any of the games. Missed week 3. Caught 2 balls for 15 yards week 1, 2 for 19 week 2. He hasn't been in the end zone. Capped out at 3 catches, capped out at 4 targets. Runs a fair amount of routes. He's 3 out of the 4 games he played, he was over 20 routes run. It's not insignificant. But again, if they're not throwing you the ball, I really don't care if you're running sprints. 3 targets a game going toward the tight end, Will Dissly. Very limited involvement for him, and he is just one of those, dump out safety valve type tight ends. Spin off a block and pick up the catch, but gain nothing. 7.4 yards per target. I mean, it's not nothing as far as his gains, but just a 1.5 yard ADOT, 2.6% of the air yards. Hasn't been in the end zone yet. Pretty thin. Simi Fehoko has gotten a little bit of involvement. He was targeted 4 times last time out. It's just 1.4 overall in the average. But without the threat of DJ Shark coming back, I think there's a little bit of potential for these downstream receivers in this passing attack to at least continue what they've been doing. For Fehoko, that amounted to 2 catches on 4 targets last week for 44 yards. Week 5 bye, he caught no balls in week 4. Ran 5 routes on 12 snaps. Week 3, he played 33 snaps. He ran 20 routes. He was targeted 3 times and caught 1 pass for 17 yards. Has not been in the end zone this season. Paper thin, but at least good depth of target. So again, upside for just the big scoring event. On a 2-game slate, there is potential there. Justin Herbert can deliver that pass. He really has not delivered that pass, but he can. Darius Davis further down the board should be involved on a even thinner basis. He's seen 0.4 targets per game. He's been out there for snaps in every game except for the week 4 game against Kansas City where he only played on special teams. He maxed out last week at 18 snaps. He ran 7 routes on those 18 snaps. Was targeted 2 times, caught 1 ball for 8 yards. He also picked up 14 yards on 2 rushing attempts. Little minor involvement as a speedy put the ball in his hands and hope something happens kind of a guy. On a team kind of desperate for offense, you could see a couple of touches going his direction, but I think we're talking about a total dart throw that is getting, we're maxing out around 5 potential touches for him. We're maxing out around 5 potential touches for him. Really, really weak on the Chargers side. The best thing the Chargers have going for them is the fact that they're playing Arizona. That's the really only thing feeding upside for this team. McConkey, I kind of breezed past him, just talked about the targeting. Caught 4 balls on 8 targets for 43 yards in week 6. Had a touchdown in week 4, 5 catches for 67. That was his best game. That came on 7 targets. Had another touchdown in week 1 on 7 targets. Caught 5 of those for 39 yards. But 67, again, was the season high so far. 5 catches is the season high. He's been there twice. But that does make him their lead receiver. Top options for receivers going over 100. It's got to be Godwin. I'd say for a 100-yard bonus, Godwin, Zay Flowers, then Mike Evans. Maybe you'd throw Marvin as number 5. Touchdowns for receivers, I would say Evans, Godwin, Harrison, Flowers, and I forget who the 5th guy was. Maybe I only had 4. Whatever. I think those are different rankings depending on what you're looking for. But either way, I think these are our top 2 safest, also highest ceiling guys at the wide receiver position. Baker plus 2 stacks with both of those guys, no issues on either site. Baker plus either one of those guys and an alternate like Cade Otton, like one of the downboard receivers, perfectly capable. Given the volume with which they throw the ball to the running back, outside of the fact that there are 3 different guys that might get each target, I don't mind the idea of going a Baker plus Godwin or Evans plus one of the running backs. On a 2-game slate, I don't even mind getting even deeper with that and going with a plus 3. So a lot of ways to stack Tampa Bay together. I think they're the most interesting team on this list, or on this slate rather, because again, their quarterback, while he's going to be popular, will be the lower owned out of the 2 premium quarterbacks. So kind of interesting. Defenses again, it's defense is going to be between 4.5 and 8 fantasy point projection, and it just kind of rides with how the defenses perform. No real secrets here. These are the opposing stats for each of these, so don't look at these when we're sorting the defense. Just I wanted to show the projections there real quick. Any one of these defenses, easy to see some success. These are the 2 better scoring defenses, given their sack rates. All 4 of these teams around similar as far as the capability in the defensive backfield to come away with an interception. But Tampa and Baltimore get a little bit more pressure. They get a little bit more of a sack rate. But both teams can get carved up, and that's the game with the higher overall Vegas total. Let's pull up some Ace Mine Sim results, and then I will wish you guys luck, and we will get out of here. I'll get the site updated. Again, if you're just joining us, projections at rotoscouts.com today are free for this game, or for these 2 games. As Greg Biancone points out, we've got our first spammer. It's not a sex bot, but if you're looking, NFLGTV.com. All games streaming on. We're not affiliated. We're not promoting. We're just sarcastically saying that person is in there, just for the record, for the YouTube algorithm, for the people listening with their fingers over the ban button. I know how these things go. We don't want to lose our opportunity here. Speaking of, again, tell your friends they get a chance. All they have to do, just pull up YouTube, pull up any one of the shows that has already aired. They don't even have to attend a live show. Just pull up the channel, hit the subscribe bell, and then immediately mute my notifications so they never see it. I just want to pump up that subscriber volume. We're looking to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube before the new year. I think you guys can get it there. I really do. A lot of faith in you guys. You guys have been great to me with recommending the site to people, with constantly being here to hang out with me while I'm talking about all this shit. That's the biggest thing. The guys who have picked up subscriptions already. Love you guys. I am confident that you can help me get to 1,000 subscribers before the new year. So check that out. Check out our under $1 a day subscriptions for every single sport. NFL, NBA starting up tomorrow. They'll be live tonight on the site. The projections are already done. NHL, monster 13-game, 16-game slates tomorrow, depending on how they cut the schedule. So NFL, NBA, NHL, all going on right now. Access to all of them. Weekly, monthly, quarterly, all 3 plans under $1 a day. Just depends on how frequently you want to pony up the subscription fee. But we're not looking to break anybody's bankroll. We're looking to help, not hurt. Starting with DK. Look how Mr. Mayfield hit the board. Let's go with our top 250 here. Just since it's a 2-gamer. Get a little bit more meat on the bone. Mr. Mayfield hitting the board. A lot of the top lineups, 63% of the top 250 lineups in this sim on DraftKings came back with Baker at the captain spot. Yes, at the quarterback position. This is for the main slate. Didn't run showdown sims. Check out our guy Neil Orfield for your showdown takes. He was doing a showdown look tonight. I saw his tweet come out. Super obvious chalk. But again, this is a good example of a lineup that, despite chalk, and these guys are owned in the 60% range in this sim, that still got there. Now, this lineup got a little bit differentiated with a Greg Dortch receiver play, with a double tight end play with Otten and Mark Andrews down here, but it does go with Evans and Godwin coming back off the Baker play. So you've got that immediate direct correlation to the 2 best receivers on the slate. You've got the 2 best running backs on the slate here. You've got a fairly premium tight end that is a bring back play against on that one. You've got 2 of the more likely scorers from the Baltimore side coming back the other way in that one. There's a lot of viability in that lineup. That's not completely crazy. What we're Bucks defense in that, by the way. What we're probably going to see is fairly significant dupes. So that lineup, that top one was bringing back $204 on average. That's against a $20 buy. This is against the 88,000 entry giant tournament on DK. And that does matter, by the way. Do these for when you're running your Ace Mine Sims or Sims on any site. Make sure that you're sorting to the correct tournament, because your tournament field definitely is going to matter, the size of that field. So a couple bigger winners down here as far as the average cash in the 3, 4, and 5 spots. But this one a little bit more consistency, a little bit better ROI number. Actually, a little bit lower ROI number. Probably a better win rate. Yeah, 0.7% win rate, 7.8% top 1 probability. So this is sorted to create the lineup score with a little bit of a mix that includes win, includes top 1. I don't love throwing win in there because it's so thin with the, you get a lot of logjam just around, 0.3s. All those are the same as far as the win rate goes. Top 1 does give you a little bit more to chew on. So it all depends on how you want to look for these lineups. If you could even do it just looking for cashes if that's your thing, if you're not looking for the very top of the board. Dupes, that's what I was looking for. So that top one, that weird differentiated lineup with the dual tight end, dupe 5 times. But again, if you're splitting, what is it, $500,000? If you're splitting that 5 ways, it's $100K. Take that. Spent all your money with that lineup. It's not completely terrible. It's not all that duped, and it was our top performer in this sim. But you get down here into some of these, we do have like that second one, dupe 16 times. And then you can see where the bigger cashes come from is from these ones that are only chopped up a couple ways. So that's where ownership leverage comes in. That's where making some of the differentiated plays on a thin slate like this comes in a little bit more than it does where it's, I showed the example of the guy yesterday or Saturday for the main slate show where he'd caught 1 pass for 7 yards and a touchdown at like no ownership the prior week, but ultimately didn't matter. For a 2-game slate, that guy could easily matter. Right? It's just a matter of filling in the highest possible score at that position. So Lamar, your number 2 owned quarterback, I'm pretty sure. 19%. That is a major offset, though, especially against his projected ownership. So the sim quite clearly saying, get a little bit less Lamar and quite a bit more Baker. There's a Herbert creeping in. 8% of him. And Mr. Murray made the board. 11% of Murray. So again, not nothing with those 2 guys. They went in at that's about half the projected ownership for Murray. And like 2/3 the projected ownership for Herbert. So slight undercut to the field showing in both of those guys as far as the sim results go. And again, all of that extra, anything that you're carving off is going into Baker shares. The running back spot, Henry came up in 81% of the top 250. So again, just good chalk. You can just play Derrick Henry. It's a 2-game slate. You can just play J.K. Dobbins. He landed actually in more of these, 93% of the top 250 lineups. So you can see it's just kind of mashing that button in these 2 running back spots. You get a little Sean Tucker one in here, though. Baker with Tucker, J.K. Dobbins, McConkey, Godwin, and Evans. And you can see how many Godwin and Evans lineups are hitting the very top of the board here, too. Another dual tight end, but 2 Mark Andrews, Trey McBride, at least name brand. And then the Bucs D. So it is possible to get to the top of the board without one of those 2 running backs. But at least include one of them, I would say, in pretty much every build. Saying every build is never correct, but this is one of the more clear situations where most of your builds should probably include at least one of those 2 guys. Guy I'm not seeing a ton of. There he is, Mr. Connor. Just 15% James Conner. So that's interesting. That's the impact of Connor's kind of medium strength projection bouncing off what is the 3rd highest running back ownership. So it's interesting that he landed only in 15%. And you can see the biggest impact for that is probably looking at the flex position column. If we're just looking down this, we see a number of lineups getting through with the double tight end, for one thing, again on DraftKings. And then a lot of just straight skill players and a lot of pass catchers landing in that flex role. Not a ton of running backs in the flex spot in these sim results. So that probably does speak to the straightforward nature with which a lot of people are just going like Henry, Dobbins, Connor, Henry, Dobbins, Connor, Dobbins, Henry, Connor, over and over again. This one had that lineup, and you can succeed there, obviously. Connor, Henry, Dobbins there. Gives you McConkey, Godwin with Shepard. A little bit of a departure there. Andrews and the Bucs D. But what's that going to do to our... It brings back $200 on average. Only duped 4.5 times. It's not terrible. Kind of surprised. This is an impact probably of Sterling Shepard, low ownership. But I think it's really interesting to consider that pivot, around Connor maybe. And look at those kind of 3 running back configurations. I don't see a lot of them, and I was kind of expecting to. But that might be partially from just the cannibalizing one another that the Bucs running backs are doing. Like, here's a White, there's another Tucker. We saw some Tucker up that way. I haven't really seen much Bucky up here, but I'm sure he's involved. White's landing in more of these as we scroll down. He's in 10% of the top 250 overall. Tucker's in 5%. Just scrolling, giving you guys some ideas as you get the chance here. Receivers-wise, start with Josh Palmer in 32% of them. Again, not my favorite receiver on the board, but that's a pretty significant number. I'm going to say that's going to be higher than his projected. Coming up on 740, by the way, if you're watching the clock. Yeah, that's higher than his projected ownership by probably like half again on top. Whoops. Did the screen just go wacky for you guys? I accidentally clicked in the wrong spot. Hopefully not. McConkey active, Quentin Johnston inactive per power. That's how I had it projected. Thanks, Dev. Devin Neiman saying, Terry, you and Neil were always my favorite awesome stochastic guys. Glad to see y'all doing your own thing now. I appreciate that, buddy. Yeah, Neil's got it up a little bit bigger than I do. He's a much better at promoting and getting the word out. He's got a bigger following on Twitter. You guys can help me out with that. Also, follow the @RotoScouts Twitter handle. You don't have to follow the other one, especially this next 2 weeks. If you don't like what you've seen from that one, just mute it. I promise I'll stop after 2 weeks. But follow the @RotoScouts. That's the one that matters for this stuff. That'll help out as well. Dustin's asking, Terry, who's your favorite value wide receiver on DraftKings? It's an interesting question. Fortunately, we've got our Sims here to tell us. So we were just talking about Joshua Palmer popping for, again, essentially that's 15, 20 points on top of his projected ownership there. This is a much smaller sample. I just clicked on Greg Dortch because he happens to be in that top lineup. McConkey landing in 53%, but I don't know that I'd necessarily call him a value, and he's probably a pretty clear direct line ownership play. I don't hate the idea of Sterling Shepard as a way to get different in Tampa stacks, and he did deliver in these Sims. He's quite a few of these. 28% ownership share across the top 250 for Shep, and he went in at a much lower ownership. That might be my answer. That's a bigger dart throw probably than Joshua Palmer is. I don't know for sure what Sterling Shepard's involvement is actually going to look like here, but if you're looking for like a large field tournament dart, based on that 28% against, that's roughly 7 times his projected ownership that went in here. So we got to a lot more Sterling Shepard than the field was getting to in this DK sim. So that could be a path, but again, know that it's a dart throw. Know that it's not a safe floor kind of a play. So it depends on what you're looking for from that, but I would say that might be the answer as far as my favorite value DraftKings receiver now that I'm just looking at some of these numbers and the way that he's hitting the board. I haven't talked much Marv. Marv landed in 28%. About right, about what I would have expected. Darius Davis landed in 13%. So that's another good answer to this. Just if you want to consider, the Palmer play, the Darius Davis play. Again, total dart throws, but they're cheap and they're going to be low owned as well. But Shep gets in at lower ownership than Palmer, and he outperformed Palmer as far as against his ownership, the amount that we got to him. Simi Fehoko fits that bill too, 12% for him. But out of all of them, I just don't like that Chargers passing game that much. And they project that way. Again, I think the most interesting thing that I'm seeing here is the lack of running backs overall in the flex roll. A lot of multiple pass catcher configurations and very few 3 running back configurations. This is the one we looked at before. But I mean, how many names are we seeing at the running back position in this flex spot? Not many at all. I think that's informative for the way that you might want to approach builds on this slate. If nothing else, that might be the takeaway. But again, a lot of interesting ownership pushes. The tight end spot, Andrews was landing in 42%. Otten was landing in 49%. Obviously, there's significant involvement at the flex roll for those guys. McBride was in 40%. So it seems like those three at the tight end, and it's the three most obvious guys, are drawing a lot of the ownership shares. So that does speak to the idea that if you want to pivot one of those spots and throw it, especially at like a Likely who's just as involved as Andrews, but again on shorter depth, shorter actual quality of opportunity, but similar touchdown opportunity, that would be an interesting pivot and an interesting inflection point for the slate. Will Disley getting in there, another piece of that Chargers passing attack? Again, very limited as far as the actual quality of both the targets and the volume with that player, but he's going to be unowned and does have a little bit of touchdown upside. I'm sure he's in here somewhere. Trav? There he is. Little Batman. 20%. Not bad. Rashad Bateman, a major compliment by calling him Batman. That was against a... That's slightly under. But I would say, given the inaccuracy of these ownership projections, the margin of error is pretty significant. That's within range. I would say Bateman perfectly fine to play at or about the field, or slightly over is also fine. Just, another insecure upside guy. Herbert constructions. A lot of Dobbins, Herbert, kind of straightforward there. With McConkey and Palmer in that one. Not an uninteresting lineup. Godwin and Marvin. Herbert +3 with his 3 most likely. Mark Andrews at the tight end. Not crazy. Where's likely? That's the other individual. There he is. 5%. So yeah, again, that is an interesting disparity between the 42% Andrews, the 5% likely that came up. Somewhat reflective of, again, the nature of those targets. Also somewhat reflective of some ownership. Projected public. Andrews, we're getting basically double the projected public ownership on Andrews. And we are about a third of the projected public ownership on Likely. Kind of interesting. Let's flip over to FanDuel, and then I got to punch out for the last half hour here before lock to get things updated. FanDuel slate, a lot of Baker again. I love seeing that. I think that's the way I'm leaning. FanDuel's going to be so straightforward. JK, Derrick Henry, Godwin and Evans with McBride, Ladd McConkey, and a little curveball with Kamani Vidal in that top lineup. I don't hate that. It's kind of interesting. I don't love the Vidal and Dobbins pairing. I'd be more inclined to get that. Well, actually, no, that's not true. That's perfectly fine. On a 2-gamer, given that he'll see a couple of carries, he was just very successful, he'll see a couple of targets, that's fine. I got no issue with it. Mayfield landed in 62% on FanDuel. Significant. Lamar in 34% of the top 250. Again, the best way to do these is take your results and then filter down from your results that you get. Don't just necessarily take the top off of the sim here. You can, and in a pinch you can absolutely. But the best way to do it, make sure that you're getting some good distribution across plays. Make sure that you're not jamming yourself up and accidentally landing on 100% Zay Flowers or something. 4% went in Kyler's direction. That's pretty low. Not a lot of room for Kyler. Not a lot of room for Justin Herbert. Well, clearly it's not 0 because here's one. That might be the only Justin Herbert lineup that made the top 250. But wait, it was, 62, 34. Yeah, so there's 96% of our popularity. So then, the little other sliver went toward Kyler Murray, and then that one Justin Herbert lineup crept into the top 250. I do think there's a little bit more viability than that. Any given slate, you can definitely push that button a little harder. That was against Herbert's projected a little bit over 10% ownership. Kyler's projected in the low 20s. And then the more straightforward, obvious quarterbacks are quite a bit higher. Although, actually, Baker's not. That's wrong. There's no way that's correct. Baker's going to be more highly owned than Kyler Murray on FanDuel. I'd be surprised if it's otherwise. The numbers that went in here had them right about equal in the low 20s. If I changed that and reran the sim, and I put Kyler more at like 12 to 15, and Baker more at like 25 to 28, that would have an impact. We would get a little bit more Kyler. Not more than Baker, but more overall volume of Kyler within the top 250. It would probably approach the 10% range, 10 to 12, right around the field. Mamba likes the Lamar MVP game. He'll have an MVP game and probably one we will never see again. Could run for 5 touchdowns if he wants. That would be significant. Per Mamba, play Lamar. Maybe he passes for 3 and runs 2 in, says Dennis. Yeah, sure. Dennis saying, I think it matters what the standard deviation is for the wide receiver and the running back position as far as like how the sim math works. Yeah, that's what creates the iteration to iteration differences in, results. So yeah, it matters very, very much. If I wanted to influence somebody's sims, if it was Dave from Fantasy Cruncher and he left his laptop open at a Starbucks and I saw that his data was there and I wanted to screw him up, I think the only thing I would change would be the standard deviation column. Just jump in there and mess with that, and that'll push your results all over the place. So yeah, matters very, very much. An easy cheat for a lot of positions is 0.35 to half of the projected median projection as a standard deviation. If you don't have one to work with, it's usually about right. Do I have a lineup with no dupes with a Lamar naked? No easy way to know that. Let me look at a couple more of these individuals on FanDuel real quick, and then I'll pull up the really quickly in the last 15 minutes here. Godwin, 76% major exposure on FanDuel. Mike Evans, 48%. Trey McBride in the 40s. Defense-wise, Bucks, 40%. Chargers at 29%. Cards, 12%. Ravens, 18%. So as far as scoring defenses, the Bucks would be a little bit more favored. The Chargers, again, have just held down bad teams from scoring NFL points. I think I would probably still lean a little bit heavier Ravens defense between them and the Chargers. They came up similarly. The running back spots, Dobbins is in 96% of the top 250. Henry's in 82%. It's kind of absurd and straightforward on FanDuel. Connor just in 21%, though. And then Vidal lands in 22%. I'm sure we get a little bit of spread. Here's a Bucky. Bucky in 6%. Tucker in 14%. Connor in 21%. I said that just a minute ago. There's Rachaad White. 6% for him. On the FanDuel slate, it looks like we are getting significantly more of the running back spot and the 3 running back config. It's a mix of both. You do have a lot of good results here with receivers, but you can see just looking down these top few results, there's a Vidal, a Tucker, several Derrick Henrys here. So the multi-running back, the 3-way running back, more viable it would seem on FanDuel. All right, so before we punch out here, those are the end of the official proceedings here, but I'm going to see from Mamba real quick if there's any way in hell that I can figure out whether I have a naked Lamar lineup with no dupes in it. Fun request. So the way I'm doing that, it's happening in the background here. What I did was I clicked on that download all lineups tab, and that gives me the CSV with 152,000 lineups. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, there's probably 1 or 2 in here that are naked Lamars. All right, is that just reading the stack, or is that reading the... Yeah, all right. There we go. All right, so I want to sort by my lineup score. Okay, and now I need Baltimore 1. The answer is yes. I can give you a Lamar, Bucky, Vidal, Godwin, Harrison, Wilson, Cade Otton, J.K. Dobbins, Tampa Bay Buccaneers lineup that I don't really like at all. That's bringing back $109 on average, a 446% ROI. That one didn't have any dupes in here, but there's a number of them. Lamar, Bucky, J.K. Dobbins, Mike Wilson, Josh Palmer, Chris Godwin, Trey McBride, Kamani Vidal, Ravens. A lot of it looks like it's just chopping up dupes when I'm sorted to this by just going away from one of the two chalkiest running backs and one of the two chalkiest receivers. So essentially what it's doing is picking one of Godwin or Evans and then whatever other good receivers, and then picking one of Dobbins, and more often it looks like it's Dobbins. Actually, it's always Dobbins because we don't have any Derrick Henry in these because we sorted him out. If I could put Derrick Henry back in, then it would be a bigger return and probably better looking overall lineup. So it depends on how you get your naked Lamar if you don't count Derrick Henry, which is fair because he draws one target a game. Then you get a little bit more padding there. But there are definitely paths to success with that. So yeah, those are in play and you can get there. There's a few more of them. You can't really read that. Those are your top performing naked Lamar lineups with fewer than one dupe. Right? Or did I not sort that completely? Where's the fucking dupe column? Yeah, all of these are not duplicated. So, there's your inspiration, pal. Hope it helps. Like I said, tip your dealer. With that in mind, you guys, 7:54. Let me get a quick last update in anything that needs to change. I'll get it up on the site in the next couple of minutes. Projections are free tonight. Only tonight. Just a little promo. Throwing them out there for free for people to use. Diving in back behind the paywall tomorrow for NBA. The projections will be up this evening for the little two-gamer. Very interesting NBA slate tomorrow. Haven't decided what time the show is going to be, but during the day at some point there will be an NBA show for you guys to consume, so come on out for that. We'll talk sim results and points per minute and all those great NBA things, and we'll take a look at the slates there and get some lineups together. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Tell your friends and your family to subscribe, and then mute notifications so we can get up to 1,000 subscribers before the holidays. Otherwise, absolutely appreciate you guys. Subscriptions under $1 a day for every single plan, every single sport at rotoscouts.com. Check them out. Give acemine.io a little bit of love as well. And with that in mind, good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something, and I will see you for basketball tomorrow. Later, guys.